Hey everybody, welcome to another Midas Letter RAW for this Friday, December the 16th, is it, Edward?
I don't know.
Edward Molesky, my good friend and co-host, special head, joins us as per usual, but This is our last show before Christmas, isn't it, Ed?
Could be.
I think we're going to take a couple weeks off and stay home.
Yeah, you know what? Why not?
A staycation. I'm not going anywhere. I had a massive tree blow down this week, and oh my God, what a disaster. Anyway, so we
Big job, right? Big job.
I've spent 4
Unbelievable.
days with 2 chainsaws. I got one stuck in it, then I got the other one stuck in it. Had to bash them out with an axe and it was delicious.
Yeah, speaking of wind, I mean, look at Kentucky. Look at that. That was something else. They never get storms like that in December.
Well, this is the interesting thing. Like, is this, has the weather changed a lot quicker than anybody thought it was going to? Like, it strikes me that, you know, they were saying that if we don't do something, we're going to have these changing weather patterns. It's like, well, we haven't done something, and the weather patterns seem to be here. You look at those atmospheric rivers, they've called them now, on the west coast, on the east coast. There's a mosquito in here. Mosquito inside in December. Symptomatic of the change in the weather. You know, you've got the TC Energy pushing through the Coastal GasLink pipeline, which is just more natural gas capacity to the export facilities on the West Coast. As a capitalist, we're not supposed to be critical of that. But as a person who's concerned about the future of humanity, which I guess puts me in socialist territory, I'm concerned.
Interesting times. You know, we can talk about all the stuff, but the China thing with Russia and you got the NASDAQ stocks looking like they're starting to roll over in earnest.
Yeah.
You know, they've not given any love to anybody in the last few weeks.
Yeah.
Gold's up big today.
Gold's up huge. And we got an interesting show. You know, psychedelics are going to be a big part of mental health in the future, especially if people are about to be wiped out. We're gonna make some crazy sort of predictions here today, and you know, as Yogi Berra says, it's okay to make predictions, just don't say when. And anyway, so today our show is going to take us to Bruce Campbell's desk. Bruce Campbell's a portfolio manager for Stonecastle Asset Management. And then we're also going to have Ian McDonald here, CEO of Minds Biosciences. Very, very active company in the psychedelic space, making molecules out of psychedelics for mental health applications worldwide. Also joining us, Roden Levy, co-founder and executive chairman of Field Trip Health. He's here to talk about their psychedelic journey. And Field Trip, that's a good name.
Yeah.
But anyway, so those are our guests. If you like the show, you'll love our website. Visit us at www.midasletter.com for interviews with key CEOs, cannabis news, and to subscribe to our newsletter. We're going to take some of our audience questions. First off, Dominic M. wants to know, where can I find more information on a proper stock analysis of a company I like from your interviews? Well, Dominic, what I recommend you do if you want official certified analysis from a certified financial analyst,
A CFA,
then you should probably email the company that you're interested in, email their investor relations department and tell them that you're interested and do they have any research coverage out there.
Good idea.
And they will direct you to whatever banking company has written research on them. Now, a lot of these junior companies don't have any research, so when it comes to a proper stock analysis, as you term it, there isn't any. And that's what makes penny stocks so speculative and risky, is that there are no recognized financial institutions willing to place their name on them in any form of a recommendation or analysis even. So in many cases there aren't proper stock analysis available. And in some cases, if there is, the best place to find out where you can get it is to call the company. They might share it with you. You might have to be a client of the bank that did the research to get your hands on it. And that's the best answer I can give you.
Dig, dig, dig.
Diggity dig. Joseph Moynihan wants to know, NuRAN has a good business model, so why hasn't NuRAN been a good stock to own? Well, Josh, if you bought NuRAN stock at the beginning of this week, it is a good stock to own.
Has it had a good move?
It was at $1.10 earlier this week. It's now at, well, let's pull up the chart before I start casting aspersions on the character of companies. A full disclosure, NuRAN is a client. We have an option on 250,000 shares at $1.70, so we're way out of the money. They have provided $50,000 to cover the cost of developing the marketing content that we do produce for them.
Sure.
So that's by way of full disclosure.
Look at that move.
There's the move they've had this week. They announced today that they have a minimum of 250 sites confirmed for South Sudan. So now they had over 5,000 sites in their radar before this announcement. Now they've got a minimum of 250 more. Thus the big move in the stock. And I think,
so what was it down? It was down there to what, under $1?
No, it got to $1.10. Well, actually, let's see. There's the low end of this candle, $1.02.5.
Okay, the next day, the next candle, the low is $1.
$1.02.
$1. No? Yeah. Yeah, it says low, $1.
Oh yeah, okay. So there's the
Yeah,
bottom
yeah,
of this
yeah, yeah,
candle
yeah,
is
yeah.
$1.
Yeah, $1.
Yeah, $1.50 a penny.
So it's held $1, and now it's shot up to what, $1.50?
Yeah. So if you'd have bought
Yeah,
it back
yeah,
there,
yeah,
you'd be
yeah,
up 50% on
You know, with a lot of these companies in hot markets, the valuations get exaggerated.
Right.
So when times are tough like this, and I'd say they've been tough
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
you know, a lot of the Eastern markets are at 52-week lows. You know, so it's good to see that the fundamentals, if they're improving, it should have a positive impact, and that's what we're seeing here.
Well, and it's also true that emerging markets tend to be the beneficiaries of weakening or top-heavy North American markets.
Right.
Because that's when investors say, okay, this has run its course. Now I'm going to go shopping elsewhere. And emerging markets tend to be the beneficiary. NuRAN is fully operational and exclusively in emerging markets of, you know, the sub-Saharan Africa, Democratic.
So if they execute, back to the word execute.
Execute. Last week's word.
Yeah, so it's, there you go. That's nice to see, yeah.
It hasn't been a good stock to own because there's been a legacy seller in there who looks like they might have exhausted their position at the same time the company comes out with this great news.
There you
now
go.
the company's in a definite uptrend, and that could be new days for NuRAN Wireless. I certainly hope so. I don't make money on NuRAN until it passes through $1.07.
Yeah, well.
So there you have it. Steve Joyner, what happened to all those catalysts for weed stocks this year? Well, I don't know. What happened?
You're going to need to see serious demand increases. You're going to have to see cannabis, the demand take off, I think, for this sector to take off. And now, what are they doing in the U.S. with are they finally getting somewhere with this legislation and making it legal, or is it just...
Not really.
No.
No.
Yeah.
It's like, basically, here's the bottom line, Steve. It's been an all talk, no action.
More government bullshit.
Right, from the Biden administration. So they came in on a promise to deliver national regulation. They have failed on that promise to date. It's obviously not a high priority, and that's the bottom line there.
Apparently, the gentleman from Vancouver, Seth, the actor that's a big proponent of
Rogen.
Seth Rogen, I guess he's quite involved in trying to get legislation passed in the U.S.
Probably. I could see that.
Why wouldn't he?
Why not? I gotta wonder what it's like for a guy like him to cross the border. Because at the border, you're still not allowed. I mean,
I know what you're saying.
Why would you need to bring cannabis anywhere these days?
You wouldn't.
Exactly. You can buy it everywhere, so why bring it anywhere?
Yeah.
Okay, so Joseph Mikakomo wants to know, Mikakimo? Sorry, Joseph, if I'm saying your name wrong. Why did Voxtur do an offering at 90 cents and then complain about the stock being cheap? Laugh out loud. At this rate, the only way to list on NASDAQ will need to reverse split. Joseph, I share your sentiment rather wholeheartedly. My option is at $1.15, and every time we get close, it seems they do a financing and knock it out of the range of that. But this is just part and parcel of dealing with the capital markets entity that has 400 plus million shares out.
Yes, a lot of shares outstanding.
And so, you know, if you're going to do a financing from a bank, it's going to be at a discount to market. They reached $1.15. They probably thought, here's a good time to do a financing.
It's a $500 million market cap stock. It's a $500 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. And we know that Cormark and 8 Capital are in the business of churning capital, so obviously an attractive price for them, and so we're just going to have to, as investors, just suck it up and wait them out. And that's it. Will there be a reverse split on the horizon? Hard to say. I mean, we've talked about it with management on the show in the past. Obviously, nobody likes to see consolidation.
Very few managements like to see consolidation. And sometimes, you know, it's a bitter pill to swallow, but sometimes it works.
Usually the only reason to do a consolidation is if there's a good reason to do a consolidation, and just for the sake of consolidation is not considered a good reason in capital markets. Moving right along, Chris J, is the stock exchange the only thing holding Voxtur's stock back? When will it be on the NASDAQ? Nobody can say when it's going to be on NASDAQ or if it's going to be on NASDAQ. In fact, the NASDAQ and FINRA frowns on companies making representations that they are going to do anything more than make an application to trade on NASDAQ. Once a company has announced that it's going to make an application to trade on NASDAQ, the average time span until it trades on NASDAQ is 6 weeks.
There you go.
So if the company announces that they're going to make an application to trade on NASDAQ, or that they have, and 6 weeks later they have not started to trade on NASDAQ, there are problems with their application, and maybe they're not going to trade on NASDAQ. So first off, never put any stock in a company or anybody associated with it that says it's going to be trading on NASDAQ, because only NASDAQ gets to say yes or no.
Yeah, exactly.
So
exactly.
It's an ambition, but when a stock is trading at 90 cents and it says it's going to trade on NASDAQ, there's very little credibility to that statement. It can be categorized as nothing more than a hope and a prayer by anybody making that representation. I say that with Voxtur as my client, but that's just the truth, and that's the difference between what we do and what a lot of companies do. Mr. Sicko wants to know, we talk a lot about the copper price. Are there any stocks to take advantage of all the info you guys put out? Well, Mr. Sicko, I'm going to start with the one that I'm conflicted with, and that is U.S. copper. We'll pull up a chart here.
Yeah.
U.S. copper, I have an option that I've had for years that I've not exercised at, is it 10 cents or 12 cents? I can't remember. I own 700 and some odd thousand shares that I bought at probably an average price of 20 cents, because I'm a buy high, sell low kind of guy lately.
Yeah.
But let's look at the chart here. So this is the thing about U.S. Copper Corp. Is
and now we're in tax loss selling.
Well, and it doesn't correlate well to the price of copper. It's broken its relationship to the price of copper. So I would say it's suffering from a lack of interest and a lack of confidence among those who are interested.
The viewer that asked the question, a company that follows more closely the price of copper is Copper Mountain, which is a producer. CMMC. This thing throws off cash. Now look.
Oh, this one actually exactly tracks the price
exactly. There you go. That's because this thing's throwing off every month. 20 million bucks of free cash.
Yeah.
But there you go. So that trend broke on the commodity as well. And yesterday it came very close to breaking down, and miraculously, Biden comes out, Powell comes out, talks about the strong economy, and copper jumped 15 to 18 cents since yesterday at this time.
Yeah. The bottom line is, what are you looking for in a copper mining company or a copper exploration company? In a copper mining company, you want a company that doesn't have 1 billion shares out and is mining a decent grade of copper, i.e. above 1%.
Yeah.
And cost of production is, below 50% of the copper price. That makes a worthwhile copper investment. If it's an exploration company, you want one that's got a huge deposit, huge upside potential in a safe jurisdiction, not with a bunch of shares out, and one in which there is still interest and confidence because it hasn't been around for 20 years. That is not U.S. copper. I still hold it because I'm a believer. What can I say? one day it will turn around. So there's that. All right, back to the audience questions here.
That's a nice chart, though. I got to say.
Yeah, it is a nice chart.
Yeah.
Marv Simpson, what is your top investment criteria before entering a stock?
I'm changing my investment criteria because what I've been using hasn't been working.
Yeah, my investment criteria personally is
if it goes up, I buy it.
Yeah, basically. If I go, and then if it goes down, I sell it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like to buy a stock that is I like to participate in a private placement that's at a discount to market, and I prefer a stock that doesn't have more than 100 million shares outstanding. And I prefer a stock that is in a hot sector. So those are three criteria. Now, outside of those, there's a whole bunch of other. If they're going to pay me to tell their story, that makes them makes the stock more attractive in my view. So I have all kinds of elements associated with stocks that the average investor doesn't have access to. So probably my criteria is not going to be your criteria.
Everybody's got different objectives.
Yeah, and at this point I have to say consult a registered investment advisor in your jurisdiction so that your money and his experience can become his money and your experience. As Edward likes to say. Okay, Edwin W. Why did stocks rally after the Fed announcement despite taper increase and 3 rate hikes in 2022? Edward?
Well, I think it was the quite bullish tone of Chairman Powell. He's saying the economy's, unemployment's at near record lows. You're starting to see wage pressure. All these things are saying strong economy.
Yeah.
And as long as commodity prices stay firm,
right,
like we saw today with gold rallying, silver's up 4%, copper moving. As long as the commodities remain strong, there's demand. As long as there's demand, the economy's moving. I think the other thing too, we've had shitty markets for a few days, and so you get shitty markets, you get a trend, you get a counter trend.
Chairman Powell said, "Hey, trends down. That was a good day to make an announcement."
Yeah,
might send the stock the other direction.
Yeah, there you go. And today now, and markets are betting.
The Fed put, and don't fight the Fed. Is that still holding intact?
Don't fight the Fed.
Don't fight the Fed.
Too big.
All right. Hope we answered your question, Edwin. Might not have, but Alex Arvin wants to know, what are good websites to read news every day to keep up to date with markets? I mean, I got to say I like TradingView because I trade speculative stocks, and there's always a lot of scuttlebutt going on behind the scenes, and there's guys with a track record you can see. And sometimes it's good to follow their bets. Now, I don't follow their bets, and I don't really pay any attention to what they're saying. I use my own criteria as...
Your own crystal ball.
Yeah, I have my own crystal ball.
Yeah, what?
And that's I can't see anything in it, so but I've juggled them. But what are some good websites?
Like
MidasLetter.com.
Midas Letter is a good one. You're starting out in a good spot.
Let's see. What are some other good websites?
That's the one I like is that Tyler Durden thing. Zero Hedge.
Zero Hedge. Yeah, Zero Hedge used to be good, but to me it's become too wackadoodle. Like It's got way too much conspiracy theory going in it now. It's like everybody's wearing a tin hat there. The fact that Tyler Durden is 50 people and you never know which Tyler Durden you're getting, you don't know. Like I don't put a lot of stock in that anymore. I used to read it because it used to.
Well, there's some articles that are still they find things that are not that aren't sort of mainstream, right?
Yeah. Thomas Carter says, "I'm looking for some books to learn how to trade seriously. Would you be able to recommend something practical?" Again, depends what you want to trade, Thomas. And if you want to trade penny stocks, I think that some of the good stuff to read is actually Doug Casey's very entertaining and very insightful.
Yeah.
In a bull market in junior stocks, probably he's 90% right. Jim Dines is a good guy to read, especially his work on herd mentality. There's a lot of great pieces, a lot of great stuff.
Read the book Reminiscences of a Stock Operator by That's a classic, right? The guy that ultimately committed suicide. No, but he was a great shorter.
Yeah.
Reminiscences of a stock operator, and he uses a pen name. I can't forget the guy's. He uses the name Edwin Lefebvre or something like that. And there's a big picture of a bear on the cover. That's a great book to read.
If you're enjoying the show, subscribe to Midas Letter on YouTube so you stay up to date on everything investment.
We're going to take a look at, now we've had the Fed come out and say that there's going to be 3 rate hikes in 2022. At the same time that the Fed has come out and started to taper the rate at which they quantitatively ease. So they're still growing the balance sheet.
They're easing slower. They're still easing,
but slower.
But less easing.
But now, if you're going to raise rates, I mean, does that not imply that the intention must be to remove all quantitative easing? If inflation is in fact what we're targeting here, and we know that quantitative easing fractionally banks out to a multiple exponentially from the quantitatively eased amount.
Chairman Powell spoke yesterday, testified.
Not Chairman Mao.
No, not Chairman Mowell. Chairman Powell. And he talked about, like the economy's running on all cylinders, firing on all cylinders. So
the economy is.
Yeah, well,
what happened to the supply bottlenecks that were causing all these items to be back ordered on everything from Amazon to Walmart to everywhere?
Right.
How can there not be an economic impact from those supply chain shortages causing backlogs of orders, which is, consumer goods, producer goods, raw materials for manufacturers? What's the deal there? You got an opinion on that?
Doesn't it just look murky out there?
Yeah.
When you back out the big companies out of the index, out of the NASDAQ, the market's been brutal this year.
Well, I mean, let's look at some of the major fundamental events happening. Geopolitically, we have Putin 6 days after being in a conversation with Biden where Biden says, no, don't go near the Ukraine or else. 6 days later, Putin and the Chinese premier issue a joint sort of release where they're talking to each other all friendly like, saying, we got to stick together, you and I, because these Westerners are trying to cut our grass.
You know what? It just, you think you got issues, but then you think about these issues, and there's always this big hammer somewhere, right?
Yeah.
But it looks like things aren't as clear and rosy as it used to be.
Right. So you've got China and Russia agitating, China with Russian troops amassed on the Ukraine border. You've got tapering in the Fed as well as rate increases. So we have this prospect of a destabilized geopolitical environment amid quantitative easing reductions and rate increases. If I didn't know any better, I'd say we were being set up for a major economic storm. What do you think?
The charts look a little goofy.
All right, well, let's take a look at this one right here. Let's see, we got Bitcoin up here. Let's go full chart. Okay, so there's the big drop.
Yeah.
And
now put up 1 year.
1 year.
I want to see there's a potential double top there. Okay, you got a big top here and a big top there. It broke through briefly, but then when the ETFs came out and blah blah blah, it's
blah blah blah.
I think it's getting ready to break support here in that mid 40,000 level.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's take our little arrow here and point it over here because this is the new trend, right?
Yeah, I'd say there's a trend there for sure.
Yeah. So all we need to see that trend to continue is lower lows
and break those lows over here.
If this gets broken,
then
Katie bar the door.
Katie bar the door. Yeah, okay.
So let's go see how gold is doing, because gold is often a bellwether of imminent economic hardship across the macro sphere. So here's gold. This is the spot price. 1796.
Yeah, big jump today. Actually, in the last 2 days, we went from about 1760 to almost $1,800, $40. So it's a start.
Yeah. So what about oil, though? Let's take a look at the oil chart. $72. bounced off its recent lows here.
Yeah.
Now this is where Biden, I guess, and Powell are suggesting that the economy is doing well because they're looking at the price of oil. They're certainly not looking at the consumer numbers because, you know, confirmed inflation at 6.2%, highest level in 40 years. Thus the, you know, so now we've got these contradicting statements out there. Chairman Powell saying the economy's on fire, yet and that justifies the hiking of rates.
There's some funny cross indicators. You know, oil came off of mid 80 level down to 65. Now it's holding around 72.
Yeah.
You know,
look at lumber. Look at that. What is that telling us about the future supply of lumber on the West Coast? Source of most of the lumber that's used across North America.
What did that drop? That dropped to $600, didn't it? And now
was down here below 500. Back here in 574, got down to 466.50 in August.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just about the time you were thinking to maybe buy some.
Well, the interesting thing is, so I went to the Home Hardware where I buy most of my lumber and said, okay, how much are you going to sell me lumber for now? They still had their prices. They had bought all their lumber back in May. When
they pushed it way up there.
Yeah. So they said, well, the price of lumber is still at those prices. So I was at the store. This has happened this week. I was in the store last weekend, and I said, so now tell me, Jordan, how much are you going to sell me a board foot of lumber for? He says, well, it's still these low prices where they load it up. So right now, and he said, but if you're going to be needing lumber, now's the time, because as soon as we're run through the lumber we got, we're going to be paying these
So did you buy some lumber?
I have not. You know why?
Why?
Because I jumped back into GMG, and so now I don't have any liquidity. So and now.
And how's that? How was that move?
Well, I bought another 20,000 shares at I think an average of 575.
Okay.
And it's now at, well, let's take a look at GMG. Full disclosure here. Obviously, I own it, and so am conflicted.
Yeah,
518.
Yeah, so, there you go. There you go.
Yeah, so I'm down handsomely. Bought highs. If I sold it now, I'd be selling low. So
yeah, buy high.
Yeah. And so yeah, I should be buying some lumber, but I haven't yet because I don't need. Here's the thing.
You don't really need it.
I don't. Well, I'm not going to be building again. I'm not going to resume my construction projects until at least March, April. So now, for me to load up on lumber, what happens if the economy has a major retracement? I mean, we're talking economic numbers here, not stock market numbers. What happens if, let's say, the foreclosures come off of the mortgages?
Right.
So there's a glut of real estate on the inventory.
Right.
Drives prices lower, which slows housing starts, which stops lumber consumption, which allows prices to settle back. What if I've rushed in and bought lumber and it's going to come back to, you know?
So you're looking for some dire.
I'm on the fence.
You're on the fence.
The problem is, looking at all of the indicators, you can't see clearly. I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not smart enough to say without certainty what's the market going to be in March of 2022. So, that's why I think I'm going to be consuming a lot of psychedelics in the future. And here's one of my favorite.
Oh, pine.
Yeah, here's one of my psychedelic companies I'm talking to. Ian McDonald joins us from Bright Minds. Ian McDonald is back from Bright Minds Biosciences Inc., trading on NASDAQ under the symbol DRUG, same symbol on the CSE. Ian, welcome back.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to see you. Ian, you were last with us in July this year. What's happened with Bright Minds since then?
Well, lots has happened. We have been admitted onto NASDAQ, so we had a nice uplisting there. We have been working hard in the lab. Things are going exceptionally well there. Our science has progressed considerably. Today, I would say that we have the largest and most advanced psychedelic drug discovery program in the history of the world. That's over 25 chemists working around the clock, developing completely novel psychedelics. And some of the properties that we've seen in these compounds are exceptional. These are outside of ergotamines, which are drugs like LSD. These are the most potent psychedelics that have ever been created. They're not only potent, but they're very targeted, meaning that they do what we want them to do and don't act on other receptors, which could lead to side effects that we don't want to occur. So very targeted therapies, very potent therapies, and we believe we've created what are likely to be best-in-class drugs in psychedelic medicine.
Huh, that sounds great. So then, how soon until, I know that your lead candidate drug is going to be announced in the first quarter of 2022. How do you feel about the evolution of the industry generally in terms of the regulatory side? Is it sort of moving in lockstep with the development of the companies involved in the space?
Yeah, so I mean, the beautiful thing about developing drugs in the FDA pathway, which is drugs to be approved as prescription medications, is that is completely divorced from the DEA. So in the current regulatory framework, we would have no issue getting our drugs approved, nor would other companies and nonprofits getting their psychedelic drugs approved. MAPS is a nonprofit that's taking forward MDMA, or what's colloquially known as Molly or ecstasy, for treatment, for post-traumatic stress syndrome. And although that is a scheduled compound, both in the United States and Canada, once that's proven safe and efficacious to treat that indication, that will be a prescription medication. So the good news is we don't need any changes in order for our business to be successful. So I think that society's viewpoint is something that's coming around slowly, but with regard to the letter of the law, we have no issues developing our drugs at the moment.
Right. Wow, that's great. Okay, so then tell me a bit about your novel 5-HT2A. What are the sort of mental illnesses that are being targeted as treatment worthy by this drug?
Yeah, so I should just say that 5-HT is just a fancy way of saying serotonin. And serotonin, there are a number of different serotonin receptors. There's around 14 in your body. So the serotonin 2A receptor is the psychedelic receptor that's responsible for the psychedelic effects as well as the therapeutic action of these compounds. And the drugs that we're creating there are many. They have slightly different flavors, if you will. Some last longer, some are shorter acting in terms of duration of experience, and they have slightly different flavors in terms of their the specific serotonin receptors that they act on. All of them work on 5-HT2A, but some of them work on a couple different receptors as well. So those drugs that we're creating that work on serotonin 2A receptor can be applied to a number of different disease states. I would say that the one that's certainly been getting the most attention is depression, and these drugs certainly will work for depression, some better than others. But the therapeutic applications of psychedelic drugs go far beyond just depression or potentially PTSD and traditional neuropsychiatric indications. These drugs could potentially treat things like Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration. There have been some pilot studies that have been done in those fields with promising results to date, as well as I think you could look at some different neurological indications as well. So there's really a large gamut of disorders that these compounds can treat.
Yeah, sure. Well, anything for dementia, I'm thinking that's going to be my sweet spot.
I unfortunately that's a problem that's plaguing the world, and we have a drug that treats. So I think that the 5-HT2A drugs can treat the underlying condition of Alzheimer's and really stop stop people from developing dementia. That certainly has potential to. But our drugs, different drugs of ours, our 5-HT2, what we call our 5-HT2C program, treats the symptoms, the negative symptoms that are associated with dementia. So if you have dementia, chances are you will develop a form of psychoses. And that could be, for instance, your grandmother who's living in the basement that think the FBI is out to get her, or there are aliens that are going to be coming in the house every night and doing all sorts of bad things. And this distortion from reality can frequently lead to agitation, and it's that agitation that typically results in a situation that devolves into something that's too disruptive to have that person in the house, and that's typically the catalyst for putting them into nursing homes. Now, the drugs to treat that psychoses are they're typically addressed with hardcore schizophrenia drugs. Schizophrenia is a much more intense form of psychosis, and it's sort of like killing a mouse with a sledgehammer. It's a drug that doesn't necessarily perfectly fit the bill of addressing those symptoms for a dementia patient. So our drugs are, I'd say, a little less intense in terms of their action, and are actually a perfect fit for somebody who's experiencing dementia-related psychoses and aggression.
Sure. Okay, interesting. I'm going to ask you a question that's actually personal at this point, because I have a friend whose son has been struggling with suicidal thoughts, so we'll say. And so I'm curious, because I have this personal relationship and situation and peripheral in my life, I'm wondering, how soon is it till I can say to my friend, hey, I can get your son into this program as an experimental sort of participant to sort of move this entire evolution of this new branch of mental health along? How soon till that's available to people like my friend's son?
So I would say that psilocybin to treat depression can be available through a doctor's prescription in as soon as, call it 2 to 3 years. However, if you're talking about experimental trials, there are efficacy trials that could be going on as soon as next year that your friend's son could potentially enroll into. And I think that if your friend's son is in a bind and lives in Vancouver, then many other places in Canada, there's a lot of ways to get psilocybin and different psychedelic compounds.
Sure, we're in Ontario here.
Okay, yeah, maybe a little harder than our friends on the West Coast.
Right. Okay, so finally, Ian, which of all of the various psychedelic compounds that you're developing, which of them excites you most and why?
Well, so we have developed a number of different compounds. We've created literally hundreds of novel psychedelics. Some look like psilocybin, which is an active ingredient in magic mushrooms. Others look like LSD. Other ones are completely novel chemical classes that don't really resemble anything that's been seen before. So the ones that excite me the most, there's a couple of compounds. We class them by number. We call this internally compound 114. 114 is one of the most potent psychedelics out there. It's hyper targeted to the therapeutic receptor, and we believe that this compound and one's analogs of it could be potentially the best in class agent to treat depression. So that still has to be borne out by science and data, but what we've seen so far, we really like and are excited by.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. All right, Ian, we're going to leave it there for now. I really appreciate the update. Sounds like you're making great progress. We'll come back to you soon enough, and thanks for your time today.
Thanks so much.
You bet. Bye for now. All right, so Bright Minds, not really performing that great since it got its NASDAQ listing.
Yeah, you see it got up to $10 plus,
Yeah.
and now it's what, $4?
Well, but the volume's really dried up here. Look at this volume, it's awfully light. 8,000, 9,000, 10,000 shares here on the CSE. Let's tell you what, let's go take a look at what the stock is doing on NASDAQ.
Yeah, look at that.
Look at even less volume. This is a company in need of our help. So anyways, this is great. The interesting thing about Bright Minds is, as they say, they're making all these
Where are they based? Where are they based?
BC, as he indicated in the interview.
Oh yeah, that's right. That's right. I think I was sneezing at that
Yeah,
point.
you were having a good old COVID schnauz, were you? Yeah, but so let's take a look at some of the other charts now. So
Voxtur had big news.
Voxtur raised another 15 million bucks. Minimum 15 million bucks. We won't know until December 22nd at 90 cents. So Voxtur is our client. And so normally when we see a client do a raise like that, we expect the stock to retrace to the issue price of the recent financing. Still holding at $1.02. It hasn't gone slamming back to 90, but it seems to be on its way there. And I'll be surprised if it doesn't drift lower to 90. Got to disclose that we are option holders, and we were in the money for about 15 minutes last week at $1.17.
Did you sell?
No, we didn't sell because
didn't have time.
Well, what are you going to sell? Exercise an option for 2 cents.
I'm being
and plus, we're
facetious.
honestly long-term believers in this company.
Yeah, I know. It's they're executing, and when management, if they can raise money, you know what? It makes this company stronger.
Yeah, and they did raise, so they raised, the last raised money at 75 cents or 70 cents. Now they raised money at 90 cents. So they're, okay, that's not the big jump in issuance that we'd like to see, issuance price. However, it's not nothing. At least they're still raising money at progressively higher levels.
Right.
Most importantly, their financials, they released their quarter recently. They're up another double-digit Q on Q from last quarter and over the same quarter last year. So, and they had 37 million in the bank when they announced that quarter. So it's a little bit surprising to see them raise money here, especially from 8 Capital and Cormark, who, I don't know, I can't say as I've seen them doing any favors to the company. But whatever, we're just going to have to suck it up and watch what happens. So yeah, we'll wait for press releases. Again, full disclosure, we have 1 million options at $1.15, so we're not in the money, and we don't receive any cash for what we do with the company, so technically this is all at our own expense.
Apple got really close to $3 trillion this.
Let's take a look at the Apple chart here. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, I'm no technical chartist, but this looks like it's some resistance up here.
Well, we had a major peak. Look. This was one of the few stocks that was actually hitting new highs. It was maybe one of the only major ones, while the others were retreating. The other ones have not. So is it the last bit of money going into Apple because they perceive it to be the safest company? And I think that's kind of what's happening here. Now, if we turn around and blow through this and keep going, all bets are off. But, I see Amazon's down $80 today.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting philosophically from this, the Fed has basically adopted this position of the wealth effect. Whereas if we keep stimulating the economy, that money trickles down and creates the wealth effect. If we keep allowing synthetic assets like cryptocurrencies and NFTs to join the party, then people are making money. So it seems to me like despite the utter ridiculousness of calling these things assets, when they are really figments of somebody's
imagination. Yeah.
Ultimately, there's no intrinsic value there. And they say there's no intrinsic value to gold, but that's ridiculous. Gold is one of the most conductive materials known to mankind, and electronics are full of gold. So that's just an utter nonsense. But that's part and parcel of what's being projected by the Fed. If it's like an old asset class that's been around and has carved out its niche, then nobody wants anything to do with it. Everybody wants the newest thing. So now we have these NFTs going for millions of dollars more that cost zero to make. And I mean, it's just a make-believe world, and they're calling it the metaverse.
Tulip mania.
I guess we're just, either we're super dumb, Ed, we're super dumb and we just don't get it.
Yeah.
Or they're super dumb and they just don't get it.
Yes, a comment was made too about the cryptos yesterday about, more regulation. More
regulation. Yeah. Well, more regulation is more legitimacy.
Yes.
So we'll see about that. Oh, Bruce Campbell joins us now from Stonecastle Cannabis Growth Fund. Bruce Campbell joins me now, Portfolio Manager of the Stonecastle Cannabis Growth Fund. Bruce, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me back on.
Yeah, it's great to see you, Bruce. Bruce, let's start with today's news that Malta has become the first EU nation to legalize cannabis, and very much modeled on the Canadian system, whereby adults will be allowed to carry up to 7 grams and grow no more than 4 plants at home. Does this have any bearing or significance for the cannabis industry, in your opinion?
Well, it's like anything, right? It's a tide change, and when that happens, presumably it'll start to move other countries in the EU to change their legislation. It's not one of those things that happens overnight, but it's not unlike what we saw in Canada with the medical to recreational, or what we're seeing in the US right now as well.
Sure. So then, what in your view is the outlook for the cannabis industry for this year? And how do you reconcile that with the sort of dismal performance that has happened this year?
Yeah, well, I think it's probably fitting that you're sitting in a fish tank right now, because like the whole sector's underwater, right? So that was really bad, wasn't it? Yeah. So I mean, obviously the sector's been extremely challenging this year. We saw out of the gate, the first 3 months or 2.5 months of the year was really straight up. And that was all based on U.S. legislation that we thought was going to happen. And then when it wasn't happening, stocks started to drift. We've had some issues with custodians. The stocks continued to drift. There was a sort of quick restart in November when it looked like legislation was going to be put in place. And then, they've sold off, and now they're under heavy tax loss selling. With the year, the way it's turned out with the markets, where, if you look at the S&P, NASDAQ, pretty much any index, it looks fairly strong, and they've been fairly strong. There's lots of people with winners. Obviously, they're looking at cannabis and harvesting their losses. And so, this probably continues right up until the end of tax loss selling. And then, at that point in time, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a bit of a bounce in cannabis. I don't think it's going to take off and roar like it did yet, but we could see a bit of a bounce because, a lot of this stuff's been under pressure. At the same time, especially in the U.S., the U.S. MSO, their underlying businesses have continued to strengthen. They continue to get more access to capital, and they continue to grow. And their stock prices have come down. So from a multiple perspective, they're a lot more attractive than they were at the beginning of the year or even a year ago. And that's going to obviously have an impact on some investors. And, you'll start to see some money flow in there. And then with any luck, we'll start to see, as we move towards the U.S. midterm elections in next November, we'll start to see, some more talk of legislation. And at that point in time, maybe it looks like it's going to be put into legislation. And then, we'll start to see the stock prices move up in anticipation of that.
Yeah. A lot of the sort of high-profile social media cannabis investors, they've been broadcasting this sort of sentiment that it doesn't matter what happens at the federal level anymore in the cannabis industry in the U.S. because the cannabis industry has evolved to operate as efficiently as possible under whatever restrictions happen. Yet, the share price performance in 2021 would suggest that, well, that's not necessarily the case. So, in your view, is there any sort of expectation that the 2022 rather, and a potential change in Congress is going to have any relevance to cannabis investors in terms of share price performance of American MSOs?
Yeah, there's obviously a few things kind of on the horizon there. One is that, originally this was really any type of legalization change in legislation towards cannabis was really democratically pushed. And just recently there was a Republican that led sort of new legislation that came out. And that was kind of the first time that we really saw that. And the thought is now that, the governments on both sides recognize the importance of cannabis for, the general population, with the fact that, over around 60% of the population is in favor of recreational, and it's over 90% in favor of medical. And so, they think that that's going to probably be something that they want to stand up and take credit for. Like, we did it, here, elect us. So that's obviously, something that can drive share price, and the anticipation of that happening and kind of the legislation potentially moving ahead. Even if it stays where it is now, it's probably ultimately it will end up being legalized. We know that that's going to be the case. It's just a function of when. And so if you're an MSO, you probably don't want it, because now they have access to capital. Like Curaleaf just did a bond deal this week where it was less than it was like 8.25%, which is fantastic, money. But they have access to capital. They probably don't want it to be legalized because it gives them a moat for a while. From share investor perspective, you obviously want it to be, because that's where you're going to start to get larger institutions. Now, to that point, one of the things that that the CSE has announced is that they're going to have a tier system now. So they're going to have a top tier where most of these cannabis companies would fall into, and the reporting requirements are a lot more strict. So it'd be closer to what you would expect on the TSX or NASDAQ or the New York Stock Exchange. And so potentially that could bring in more investors who have shied away because the CSE's rules up until now. So that's a potential that, after 60 days of comments, we could start to see that moving forward. And that's another thing that could potentially be, a change.
Yeah, interesting. Do you expect to see anything happen on the part of the Biden administration in terms of federal action in the cannabis space?
Well, that's what, if you look at the sort of the run up that we saw from a year ago to February of this year, that was really what that was all based around, was the thought that, Biden was going to come in, and then one of the things that they were going to do in the first 100 days was, look to changing the legislation on cannabis. And, obviously a lot's gone on since then. We've got a pandemic, we've got, now we're wrestling with all kinds of other issues, and that's always going to be the case, I guess, but it seems like it's taken a bit of a back burner. But who knows, that could all of a sudden change if they think we're going to try to win back. Right now the projection is that they're going to give up a bunch of seats in the midterm, and if they said, hey, we're really going to try to dig in and get some of those seats back, maybe cannabis is one of those things that they try to change to rally back and get those seats back that they are projected to lose.
Interesting. Okay, so has your sort of lineup of companies in the space changed at all in terms of favorite from most favorite to least favorite in terms of your holdings?
Yeah, not a whole lot. We still like the large MSOs. There's a few of them that are probably cheaper than others, and then we've got a few smaller companies that we own that we think are niche, that have a view on a specific state or a few states, and then we've got a few Canadian companies that we think are executing in a really challenging market, are executing well, and that's kind of how the portfolio is made up.
Yeah. What do you make of there's been a lot of sort of a lot of changes in the cannabis management as a result of, I'm just going to say unproven allegations at this point in terms of things like, the involvement of organized crime in some cases, insider trading in other cases. And, it just sort of dawned on me recently that the cannabis industry in many respects remains a criminal enterprise, at least in terms of all of these things that seem to go on behind the scenes. You name it, the industry has been plagued with scandal. Do you think that we're getting closer towards more of a sanitization of the industry in terms of like these just being natural growing pains of an industry emerging from the black market to the legal market?
Yeah, 100% agree that that's where we're headed. We're probably closer now than we ever have been. If you kind of go back in history and look at, kind of the pioneers in the sector from a public standpoint, a lot of them had some type of, kind of black gray market participation. A lot of them had, they were visionaries, so they didn't necessarily have the best past as far as, proven record of success. And there was a lot of money thrown at the sector in a real short period of time. And of course, that brings in a lot of bad actors in itself. And so you sort of throw all those conditions together, and, it was really a recipe for, kind of mismanagement and, kind of the worst of the worst as far as people doing things they shouldn't be. That's certainly changing. If you look at, sort of the top cannabis companies and how many times now several of them have, guard changes at the top, which is, quite interesting. And I think that, the sector continues to get, dressed up from a business corporate C-suite standpoint that we hadn't ever seen in the past. And I think that probably continues, especially, considering the money that's still there in the sector, and that, projections on where the sector will go both in Canada and the US.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right, Bruce. Well, that's a great update as per usual. I thank you for your time again, and we'll talk to you in the new year. Have a great season, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, you too.
Bye for now.
The marijuana space really has been sucking hind tit in a huge way, wouldn't you say?
Look, it's now down to fundamentals, right? If you walk anywhere and you look anywhere, there's a marijuana shop.
Yeah.
There's, barriers to entry. I don't think so.
Right.
Is it difficult to grow the stuff?
Right.
I mean, I think I think it's going to be tough going for a lot of these companies.
Yeah, I think in Canada at least, the black market is still in charge. It's still
large and in charge.
Yeah.
Large and in charge.
And I bet you it's the same in the US, and that's why they're having a hard time making money. But anyways, we'll see. Ronan Levy joins us now, co-founder and executive chairman of Field Trip Health.
Ronan Levy joins me now, co-founder and executive chairman of Field Trip Health, trading on NASDAQ under the symbol FTRP. Ronan, welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure to have you, Ronan. Since you were here last in June, there's been quite a number of developments on the corporate front. Give me an update. What's the most exciting happenings at Field Trip in the last few months?
Yeah, well, there's been a lot going on since we last in June. Certainly, we listed on NASDAQ, which was a big step for us. We listed on the CSE initially last October, uplisted to the TSX in June, and we're on the NASDAQ in July, which has been great. Really, I think, validated a lot of the work we're doing internally in terms of operations. We can act on our strategy. We have our two divisions, if you recall, Health, which is building out the clinical infrastructure to deliver psychedelic therapies. We're operating in Toronto, New York, LA, Chicago, Atlanta, Houston, Seattle, Vancouver, Frederick. We're opening up in San Diego, so we continue to expand on that front, and everything's going really smoothly there. Not quite as disruptive, because now it's just focused on execution and continue to open on a consistent basis. I think the more exciting stuff that's happening within Field Trip is on our Field Trip Discovery side, the drug development division, where we've got two great initiatives. The first one is FT104, our first molecule in development. We expect to be in phase 1 clinical trial early next year, so first trials in man, and hope to have those completed and read out before the end of the year. So we'll have great validation on that, though we're feeling quite confident on that. And then in our quarterly, we announced a new pipeline project, the FT200 series. And what's really exciting about the 200 series is that there are kind of two main limitations or challenges with the classic psychedelics. One is the duration of action, and we're solving for that FT104, which has a much shorter duration of action. The one is called the 2B liability. And when psychedelics, classic psychedelics, taken frequently or in too high doses, it can create a cardiovascular risk. And what we have in our 200 series are molecules that are as potent as the classic psychedelics in terms of the psychoactive, psychotropic effect, but with significantly reduced 2B activity, which means we've really addressed that 2B liability. So I think through our pipeline projects, we're addressing two of the fundamental limitations overall on psychedelics and building a class of psychedelic medicine that I think is going to be far superior to the classics. Not that anything necessarily bad about the classics, but I think a lot better in exactly what we're doing with Field Trip.
Right. So at all of your 9 clinics, are you actually actively treating patients from the general public?
Yep. We as soon as the clinic opened, we were working with people. A vast majority of people we're seeing are depression patients, but we treat people with anxiety, PTSD, eating disorders as well. In fact, the results we're seeing in clinics are quite remarkable. Now, admittedly, this is only an internal study, so it hasn't been validated or published, but in our internal review of people's results and improvements, what we're seeing is the average person who comes into our clinic goes from severe depression symptoms down to mild depression symptoms after 1 or 2 sessions, and after course of treatment, benefits are sustained for close to 120 days. As far as I'm aware, there is no depression treatment out there as effective as what we're offering within Field Trip. And this is notable. We take a slightly different protocol than what you found other ketamine IV infusion centers, where they just treat ketamine like a drug. Because we're pairing it so closely with psychotherapy, our results suggest that our treatments are offering benefits up to 3 to 4 or 5 times longer than ketamine IV infusions. So it really gives credence to the protocols we've developed within Field Trip.
So help me understand, just for an example, using the psilocybin analog, what is the sort of what is removed from the experience of a psilocybin psychedelic trip through the use of a isolated molecule relative to the actual fungal matter?
It's a good question. I'm not fully understood exactly how the difference between using the mushroom itself versus an isolated psilocybin, isolated T104, will have an impact. It's likely, like we with the cannabis industry or cannabis, that the entourage effect in cannabis seems to lead to slightly better outcomes than just an isolated THC or CBD. It seems plausible that you would see that natural psilocybin is aesthetic, but all the studies today, all the results that we see that suggest that psilocybin-assisted therapy can provide up to 5 years of depression relief, maybe not in totality, improvements, have all been done on psilocybins. So when we're comparing apples to apples, the results are fantastic. If we compare synthetic psilocybin to 104, again, we're working from incredible results already. So no one's really looked at synthetic versus natural, and maybe there might be slight improvements natural product. Maybe not, we don't know. The real question is, how effective is psilocybin? And the studies using synthetic psilocybin are the ones that are really establishing the standards, showing incredible results.
Mm-hmm. The psychedelic mental health sort of treatment universe has become quite crowded of late. And I'm curious as to your opinion as to how many players can the industry support? Is this something that there's room for everyone, or is it more a case of this is where everybody rushes in and through a process of attrition, ultimately the more successful ones will prevail while the pretenders to the throne will not succeed?
Yeah, I think anytime you have an industry with such excitement and such promise, you're going to have a lot of people rushing in to participate. I do expect that over the next couple of years, you'll see both consolidation as well as the weaker players probably get squeezed out of the industry. From my perspective, just looking at from an investor lens, I would be looking at companies that management that has a track record of success, companies that are focusing on novel products for which the IP is clearly articulated and understood. One, file for a patent and get a patent issued. It's a thing to actually generate IP and technology that's meaningfully different. So what's exciting about FT104 from our perspective is that FT104, for which we like to have the issue we've tracked, we should have it by June of this year at the latest, and all feedback so far has been very positive. We've got a differentiated molecule that has different effect, that for which we will have a composition of matter patents. It's like, that's robust IP. Just having a patent is valuable. It has to be meaningfully different technology. The drug has to work differently than the others out there. And that's what we have here. So if I was an investor, I look for companies whose IP strategy is well articulated, where I can understand it, and the differentiation is clearly meaningful.
Mm-hmm. Okay. You reported Q2 financials on November 15th, and you reported a loss of 23 cents a share. I'm curious as to when do you see the company becoming profitable?
Yeah, it's going to be a while before we become profitable. That's not necessarily a comment performance of our clinics, which are going much in line with expectations overall. It's the nature of development. The clinics can churn out great cash flows, but to get a drug from inception through to the phase 3 clinical trials probably costs $200-300 million and typically. So as much as the clinic business may start turning positive cash flows and revenues, overall combined entity, we don't anticipate profitability for a while, but that's just the nature of all biotech and drug development. Once we get FT104, the first case, through phase 2, phase 3, we'll be getting a lot closer to profitability. So we're probably still talking about 4 to 5 years. That being said, we do expect the clinic's business to continue to ramp on a healthy basis and hope to start to contribute to positive cash flows, at least on that division, in the next year or so.
Uh-huh. Okay, and then in 2022, what are your big sort of milestones that you're going to hit that will be representative of increased shareholder value?
So in 2022, what we're really looking forward to is getting FT4 into phase 1 clinical trials. I think that'll be a big milestone for us. It'll validate all the preclinical toxicology work that we've done, all the manufacturing we've done, and I think before the end of the year, we'll be the first readouts from our phase 1 clinical trials on FT104. We anticipate will be positive. I expect we'll have positive news on an IP for FT104 early in the year. So we anticipate being granted full composite matter patents around FT104, which are the most robust IP you can get. And we want to really continue to execute on FT200 series. We started that pipeline project. We expect to narrow in a lead molecule, a lead candidate, probably in the first half of next year, and get all the work done to get that into phase 1 clinical trials, hopefully early in 2023. That's still a bit of a moving target, but that's what we're aiming for right now. On the clinic side, we'll continue the expansion. We'll continue to help people show results, validate psychedelic medicine as a class of medicine and a really important element of the future of psychiatry. And I think those would be the two drivers for Field Trip in the coming year.
Okay, great. Ronan, we're going to leave it there for now. I really appreciate the update. We'll come back to you in due course. Thanks for your time today.
Thank you for having me.
You bet. Bye for now. All right, so here's the trading on NASDAQ in Field Trip Health. It also has been drifting lower since October. So who knows, maybe a good entry point here. Here's obviously the support. And I would say, whoa, wait a sec. It's way up. It's way down here now.
Well, maybe a better entry point.
Yeah, a better entry point for sure. But so anyways, where's the support? Down at these levels. So support down back here where it went public. And remember caution that it would be going back to this level when we first started covering it, and now it has. But anyways, I'd say there's the support level, and some good news will likely send it in the other direction. So good volume in here.
Yeah.
And so we'll keep our eye on that. Anyways, that's our show for this week. Hope we gave you everything that you hoped and wished and dreamed for. We hope you come and join us next year because this is our last show of the year. We're on hiatus now till the first week of January. Hope you all have an amazing holiday season is the politically correct way to say that now.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next year. Happy investing.
See you later.